2 days after Hurricane Helene hit Asheville, I made it to the regeneration station, where I'd been selling furniture for the past year. When I stepped inside, I knew nothing was salvageable. Still, I wanted to say goodbye. I made it to my booth, which was full of furniture, but none of it was mine, so I grabbed my sign, and I cried. 2 weeks later, I needed normalcy. Before the storm, I'd had one job in the queue, and thankfully, the client still wanted her bedroom set refinished. So as I drove to pick her pieces up, surveying the horrific scale of damage, I thought, I've never in my life been so happy to get back to work. Here's the set. From best I could tell, beneath layers of decades-old oil-based paint, there was indeed solid wood, no veneer, and there was something in the simplicity of its design that made me excited. I still don't know who made it, but its tag said 1978. If I could just get the paint off, then refinish it, I suspected this piece would be worth far more than our contemporary composite wood furniture. The owner felt the same, obviously. Each piece of furniture I work on, invariably, during some point of the project, takes a turn south. Something unforeseen stalls the project. Always. My resistance to these unexpected issues is often unhelpful. Thankfully, not that I'd have admitted it at the time, the big issue appeared early with this project. The paint, simply put, was incredibly difficult to strip. Beginning with the bed frame side rails, I first scored the paint with 80 grit sandpaper, superficially, only aiming to sand off enough paint to allow the stripper to penetrate easier. My friend who paints cars does this, so I do it too. Here, I'm not sure it helped. At all. When I'm stripping paint, I do not want to apply multiple rounds of stripper if I can help it. So I apply it liberally with a brush first. Then when I'm done applying the stripper to the entire area that I'll be stripping, I'll come back and cover it with saran wrap. This helps slow down the evaporation of the stripper and hopefully it increases its effect. Again, with this particular paint, I don't think the saran wrap helped at all. Because when I removed the saran wrap, 30 minutes later, the paint was bubbling, yes, but not enough to indicate it would come off easily. I knew instantly what this meant. I was in for a fight. It always amazes me how much my technique transforms across one piece. To become efficient, one must start inefficiently. And as you're watching, the paint is being removed quite inefficiently with this metal scraper. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you like to view things, I had ample opportunity to improve my stripping process and technique across this project, which included many pieces. About right here, after I'd applied a second round of stripper, I watched the green paint, and its unbelievably adherent gray primer underneath failed to come cleanly off the first side of the first sideboard of an entire bedroom set. I started to panic. It occurred to me that by the time the next 1,000-year flood hit Asheville, I very well may still be stripping this bedroom set. Something needed to change, because in an entire morning of work, I hadn't got the paint off a single side of one board. I took a step outside into the green belt behind my workshop, and my friend, the woodchuck, reminded me of something important. Just a few years ago, he said, when I was back practicing medicine, inside a job that I never wanted, sitting at a computer all day and often, all night, he would have bet that I would have done anything to be where I am today stripping this paint, which by the way was lead-free, I tested it before starting, and that I would be thankful just to have the chance to step outside while I was working with my hands. So, I got back inside and started anew. Whatever it took, hell or high water, this paint was coming off. It was time to get more abrasive. Using my Festool sander with 80 grit paper, I began sanding off the remaining paint. Again, this proved more difficult than I expected. I found, with furniture, but also across my life, sometimes you just gotta keep going. You just gotta stay alive in the game until you find the answer. The answer to a piece's riddle can come to me while I'm folding laundry, later in the evening while I'm walking with my wife. Who knows when it's going to come, but the key is not giving up. Some days you just got to stay in the fight. I knew I needed more torque. I needed some power. And the following day, I remembered I had another Ryobi sander with more juice than the Festool sander. No built-in dust extractor, no vibration control, but damn, it started mowing down the paint. At the cost of roughly 50 sandpaper discs across the project and a layer of dust across my entire workshop, I did, indeed, start to see some more progress. Remembering a video I'd watched by Barry with Mad City Modern, I drove up to Ace Hardware, a first of many trips during this project, and purchased a carbide pool scraper. This was the biggest leap in time efficiency. I had to learn first how much pressure and what angle to place the blade to the board, but I started to really clear the paint, and I began to believe that I could actually complete this piece. Starting to see the piece come together. You got a board complete. That was a beautiful sight. On to the dresser, and another chance to refine my technique. This was the day where I felt the momentum shift. With a few repetitions under my belt, the paint was finally coming off much easier. I don't know how many times I listened to Beers and Sunshine by Darius Rucker during this project, but every listen was necessary. I must also give credit to Tyler Childers for helping with the monotony of some of these processes during the project. When I forget about deadlines, what I've got to do next, and I stop worrying so damn much about the future, and I get lost inside the work, that is my favorite part of working on furniture. This was one of those days. While not completely removed, there was much less paint remaining this time, and thus less time I had to spend on sanding. I didn't expect a butcher block top, but I loved it. With what the client wanted, a rich ebony finish, I figured the combination of different wood pieces would pick up the coming color nicely. There is no monetary value on finding the right tool for the right job. When it came to removing paint from crevices and corners, this molding scraper from Hyde worked perfectly. For your sanity's sake, I'm skipping the hours upon hours of scraping and sanding corners and skipping ahead here to the finished product. These pieces were beautiful. Their owner had made the right decision to strip them, which is always a gamble because you don't really know what's under the surface before you start. But here we found a lot of maple. Given it took 2 weeks to remove the paint from these pieces, I had ample time to consider how to stain and finish them. The owner wanted a black stain that would be rich but didn't completely obscure the wood grain beneath. If I chose a standard stain, my fear was that the stain would absorb inconsistently into the various wood pieces of the butcher block tops, create a very blurry, fuzzy look, and create something less than desirable. I could have used toner, but that would have been a tremendous amount of toner. So, I opted for a black gel stain by General Finishes, something thick that would apply consistently and something I could have more control over throughout. Gel stains get a bad rap. For the wrong project, say a mid-century walnut coffee table, where you'd want to highlight the beauty and depth of the wood grain, gel stains would do the opposite. For this set though, where we needed a ton of color with only some of the wood grain to appear, it was perfect. Unlike traditional stains, like the ones you could find at Home Depot and Lowe's, gel stains can be wiped off somewhat after they're applied, giving you more flexibility. When I began, the trees were green. As I finished, many had lost their leaves. And throughout this season, my wife and I were working through how to locate water, internet, food, along with how to mourn what had just happened to our community. This project helped me immensely. It gave me something else to think about, which was invaluable every day. And it served as a valuable connection to who I was before the storm that had seemingly changed everything about my life. Not all had been lost, and for the first time, I found myself attached to a piece of furniture. Before I lacquered the whole set, I applied a layer of Easy Vinyl Sealer by Mohawk. I did this for 2 reasons. 1, the sealer prevents the lacquer from pulling up the stain. 2, With the vinyl sealer underneath it, the lacquer will be less likely to crack over the years when the wood shrinks and expands. If you're wondering why I'm wearing swim trunks toward the end of fall, well, the answer's simple. I was out of clothes. We didn't have running water to do laundry yet. I was making do. And I honestly enjoyed the change up. After a trip to my aunt's a few hours away, I had clean clothes again, and the whole set was ready for lacquer. But first, I used steel wool to smooth out the sealer and create the optimal surface for lacquer. I do this between each coat of lacquer, and it's made a huge difference in the quality of my finishing. I came back with a microfiber cloth, then followed it with the tack cloth to make sure no steel wool fibers were left behind, which can cause discoloration later. Spraying lacquer is probably the easiest part of any project. I use a pre-catalyzed lacquer from Mohawk. This was a satin sheen. It essentially dries on contact. I keep the can about a foot away from the piece and spray overlapping passes across the piece. I use 6 layers of lacquer here. I'm so close now, I can taste it. If I didn't have a respirator on. Hardware reinstalled, it was time to deliver the project. This project was about more than a payday. It was therapy. I don't know what I would have done without this work for that month. Upon delivery, the client was happy with the result, and I thanked her for the opportunity. As I returned back to my empty workshop, an impossible piece now complete, all I could think of was how much I was going to miss working on it. And I think that's a good sign for the future.